You definitely can't impose culture.
Right.
You can guide it, but you can't impose it. So people don't sort of absorb the AWS way of doing things because they're taught about it on the first day and get the laminated sheet. They
Hi there, I'm Vishesh, your host. I'm a five-time founder, ex-CTO. I currently help startups ship faster and fix product or growth bottlenecks, all with leaner teams. Check out my work at vishesh.space. In this episode, I'm joined by Griffin Parry. He is a second time founder who turned post acquisition frustration into a $1 billion opportunity. After selling GameSparks to Amazon and working at AWS, he spotted a systemic blind spot in how large software companies handle usage based billing. In this episode, we unpack Griffin's journey across media, gaming, big tech, and back into the founder trenches with insights in culture, hiring, acquisition, and of course, SaaS billing and more. Hey, hi Griffin. Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Very nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
So yeah, you started in the media. You spent quite a bit of time, almost over a decade. What made you move out of media, start a company, and that too in gaming?
God, it was more than a decade. It was probably more like 15 years.
Oh,
Honestly, the first year of my career I worked as an accountant, but I don't talk about that anymore. So the official start of my career was in management consultancy, so strategy consultancy, and
I
then I
see.
bounced from there into a company called Sky. For those of you who know the UK, it's the big pay TV operator in the UK, and
Right.
they're very associated with satellites in the early days, and now it's they distribute their products however makes sense.
Yeah.
And so there was kind of it made sense to go because if you're a strategy consultant, you're working out like how to respond to things that are changing. And I arrived at Sky at just the point that things were changing for them. So they were just about to launch digital satellite for the first time. So not digital meaning internet. Digital
Right.
meaning digital delivery to a digital satellite dish and a digital set-top box. But then my career there was basically about continuing to respond to waves of digitalization. So it's like, okay, so what does digital satellite mean? And then it's right, the internet's a thing. What does the internet mean for us as a legacy media business? And so I would explore opportunities and then I would propose products that we might, or businesses that we might want to get involved in. And I just sort of segued into running those businesses. And the big thing that I ended up doing for most of the last part of my career there was online TV.
Hmm.
So I, I think I probably wrote the initial or the first memo saying people will watch television via the internet one day. We should do something. And at the time, everybody laughed because people didn't want to accept that as a possibility because Sky was a great company because we owned the means of distribution of television, which was a satellite
Right.
dish. But obviously, that was right. And enough people were worried enough at the time that it might be right that we put some capital aside and said, right, well, let's start experimenting with this. And so and I took that from that initial memo and the very first designs through to it being core business for me as it is now. And then the bridge into my startup career was because I had to appoint an external systems integrator to build that platform because we didn't know about online technologies. We became the reference customer of that systems integrator, and they built a really successful services business doing similar things to big broadcasters and brands all around the world, like AT&T and Disney in the US. And then they started looking at disruption in adjacent media sectors, and so doing some really interesting projects, helping big companies there sort of understand and respond to change. And one of the areas that they were working on was video games. So they did some big projects for EA and for Square Enix about how to respond to the increasing need for online platforms for games. And so they were basically gestating an idea about building an online platform business for video games because they could see the demand coming. And eventually, my closest friends at that business said, "Look, let's leave our jobs and do this because this company isn't going to take this idea forward or isn't taking it forward with enough enthusiasm. So let's go and do it together." And
Hmm.
so that's how we started sort of Starseq World. So we were operating in the video games industry, which we didn't know very well, but we were using intellectual capital that had been developed in an adjacent media sector. So we knew the technologies really well. We
Right.
just didn't know the new vertical or the new area of media that we were applying it to. But yeah, we built a great product, and that was our first business. It was called GameSparks.
And so that business was built on top of an idea that you tested in an adjacent industry, but how hard was it to still execute? Was it a venture backed business as well?
No. So I'm a two-time founder, and the current business is venture-backed. The first business it was essentially bootstrapped. It's not quite right. Like, I mean, we did have several phases of funding and we did have institutional money in the business eventually, but we started with the classic friends and family and angels, and then we would graduate to slightly wealthier individuals and
Family.
angels. Yeah. So that's how we built that business. And we got to revenue quickly, so we were able to self-fund to a significant extent as well. So that experience with the first business was quite different from the experience with the second business, where we raised big institutional funds from the start.
Right. And so you exited that business to AWS. How
We
did
did.
AWS what piqued their interest and what made them make an offer?
So there were two separate reasons that came together. One is that games was then and still are a really significant customer segment for AWS.
All right. Yeah.
So if you have, yeah, exactly. So it's cloud infrastructure. If you're running a game like Fortnite, you have a
Right.
massive back end for that game. And so the big cloud infrastructure players like AWS and Azure have lots of games customers that pay them lots of money. And not Meta, GameSparks. GameSparks was back end for games, but it was essentially a platform as a service. So we abstracted quite a lot of complexity away. So the big games companies they have the wherewithal to build things from scratch using AWS primitives,
Right.
but you require quite a lot of know-how to do that. And what GameSparks was saying is, listen, we've done a lot of the heavy lifting for you, so that there's a platform that you can more easily adopt and build on top of. And
Right.
they and AWS were, obviously thought this would be a good service that we could offer as part of our portfolio of AWS services, which is exactly what happened. So that was idea number one. Is like games was a big segment for AWS, and we would be a really interesting additional service in the AWS portfolio. The second reason was that Amazon, sorry, rather than AWS, were investing a lot in first party games at the time, and they
Right.
continue to do so. Many of the people listening have probably watched Amazon Prime and watched Amazon TV shows. So Amazon are doing exactly the same thing in video games.
Right.
And our first contact with Amazon was actually with one of the game studios who used us as a tool. They're like, well, we need a back end for our games. And they found GameSparks because we're one of the leaders in the space, and they became a customer of ours. And so that was the second reason. So, we were a strategic tool that their internal game studios wanted to use as well. So, and then the two things came together. It's like, okay, there's two for the price of one. You get a new AWS service, and you get a great tool that the internal game studios can use.
Interesting. Wow. So essentially, they became your customer before technically they became your customer before they acquired you.
Well, actually, we became their customer, then they became our customer.
Okay.
And then they realized that we could be an interesting service as well, because we were built on AWS
Yeah,
from the
makes
start.
sense.
So and this was quite a long time ago. So this was all quite innovative. So we were seen as a really interesting customer of AWS's, which
Hmm.
probably helped us become a supplier to their game studios, and certainly helped us look attractive to AWS.
And so you exited, and then obviously, what happens when you exit to a company like AWS? And did you essentially become an employee?
You absolutely become an employee. You and everybody becomes an employee. Just upfront, I think AWS are a good buyer of companies. They behave ethically, and it was a
Mhm.
really great experience. So I'm not complaining at all. But the experience of selling your company to somebody and going from being the owner and leader of the company to an employee of it is quite weird. It feels like a bit of a wrench. All that said, like, I worked there for 3 years. It was a great experience. I learned a huge amount. I have a lot to thank AWS for, so I wouldn't change a thing.
But you lose a lot of agency.
You lose agency, and it's one of those weird things where part of the reason that you're being acquired is that your ideas and your vision about what to do. So you don't lose agency completely, and you're
Right.
also, and in my particular case, I was the general manager of the service, and it became an AWS service. So it's not like I didn't have control, but it's just different. because you've gone from being an independent company to being a team within a much bigger one. All that said, like one of the things that AWS is really good at is sort of maintaining that feeling of they call it they always want it to be day one, which means that they
Yeah.
want all their units to feel like small entrepreneurial ventures.
Right.
And part of the way they achieve that is actually to break their organization down to pretty small semi-autonomous units and give them
Right.
a lot of freedom about what they do. So, sort of within that framework, I mean, I had quite a lot of agency, and it was deliberate. That's how AWS is designed to work. But you're still part of a big company, and you
Yeah.
can't get away from that.
Yeah. 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 And so, what was the biggest cultural shock for you moving from somewhere where you defined the culture to an existing culture that has matured?
I think it was easier than me for some other people because remember, I'd worked in a big company before.
Yeah. Right. Sky.
And so it wasn't completely foreign. And I'd also had the experience at Skies. I joined it when it was relatively early in its life. And
Right.
over the course of the 10 plus years that I worked there, it grew a lot into a really big company. So it's not only that I'd experienced what a big corporate is like, I'd actually experienced how that big corporate had gone from being relatively small to being much more professionalized. So I had quite a broad range of experience of how things work. It wasn't a major culture shock for me. I knew the game. It's like, okay, I know how this works. Whereas if you're some of our younger staff had never
Right.
worked for a big company before, and it obviously was quite a surprise. The other, but I'm just sort of like, there were definitely some big surprises. Like AWS is very deliberate about inculcating culture into their employees,
Right.
and they do it very deliberately, and it's very effective. So to bring this to life, to tell a story, like on the first day when you join AWS, you basically have a day one orientation, and you sit down and you're spoken to about how people behave at Amazon,
Mm.
and they talk about their leadership principles. And at the time, I think they were 14. I think there might be more now. And they go through each one of them, and say, look, this is the credo that we live by, and they give you a laminated sheet at the end of the day. And I just assumed, okay, well, this is just lip service. I'm going to file this laminated sheet in a drawer in my desk and not think about it again. But actually, they really do make reference to these leadership principles every day. It's sort of their operating system. It's how they think about things. It's how they talk to each other. It's a key reason why AWS is on Amazon has been able to scale so effectively because every newcomer into the business is basically taught how to behave as an Amazonian, and that enables them to talk to each other, and it also gives the sense of confidence that all those employees at the edge are behaving in the same way. It's like the Roman Empire. So that took me by surprise because I hadn't seen sort of deliberate inculcation of culture like that before. That's certainly not how it worked at Sky, which was much, much more organic.
Right.
So yeah, that definitely took me by surprise. And it's not a bad thing either. Like it's part of their operating system. It's part of the reason they're so successful.
I love the fact that they use a laminated sheet
Yeah, still
and
got it.
the fact that repeating your credo is so important for it to kind of distill down to every person. How much of what you experienced there from a culture building did you bring into Meter? And we can obviously talk about what Meter is, but from a culture point of view, what did you bring here?
A lot.
Hmm.
And I would say in two categories. So one is um, just the being deliberate about culture is something that we learn. So everything I've just spoken about, the fact that they really think about what it should be and they talk about it to everybody, so everybody knows how they should behave. We went right. That actually is a real enabler for that business, and so we applied a lot of thought to it. So we wrote down our operating system, and whenever we hired anybody, right from the very beginning, we said this is how we want to behave. This is how we think the company should work, and it meant that people self-selected. It's like, okay, I like that. I'd like to join the company that operates at that, or oh, I don't like that. It's not for me. And so we've been very deliberate about building a culture and sort of having everybody understand it. That's definitely learned. But the other thing that we learned from AWS is I actually think that a lot of those leadership principles are really smart,
Hmm.
were really well thought through. I mean, you look at it and you go, wow, these were people who, at the early stages of this company, really thought about how people should work with each other, and deliberately wrote it down. And so we've absorbed a lot of the same behaviors. So there is quite a lot of AWS DNA in how we operate. I mean, there's a lot of ex AWS people. There's a
Right.
lot of the same group have gone from GameSparks to AWS to Meter now. But it's also that we've said, look, we love that about AWS. Let's do that ourselves as well.
I remember a long time ago when Netflix dropped their culture document or PowerPoint, and When I got my hands to it, I was so excited to bring in a lot of the lessons from there. It it feels like you firsthand experienced it and you brought it here at Meter, but how much of cultural values can you bring? A lot of people fail copying. Is there a secret to learning from other cultures and replicating them?
You definitely can't impose culture.
Right.
You can guide it, but you can't impose it. So people don't sort of absorb the AWS way of doing things because they're taught about it on the first day and get the laminated sheet. They align with it because when they get inside the beast, they see that everybody operates and thinks that way, and so they do too. So culture has to be organic. It has to grow. It's owned by the broader team. It's not imposed by the leadership. But you can make a start. So basically, we make a start, then we bring people into the business who absorb it and help us develop it, and then we consciously think about it. It's like, are we behaving like the way we want to? Like, uh, are these values the right ones? Are our ways of working with each other right? And so you continue to tinker with it. So I don't think you can impose it, but you can guide it, and you can take inspiration from others. So I've read Netflix's values as well. I thought they were really interesting. We were pretty thoughtful, and I'm sure when we first broke down the first version of our values, that Netflix would have inspired at least some of the inclusions. Yeah, so you've got to be a jackdaw. You've got to be open to lots of influences, but ultimately you've got to plant it and let it grow. There's no avoiding that, and then it becomes self-sustaining if you've done a good job.
Right. And so AWS didn't just give you culture, it also was the seed for Meter. We can get into what Meter is, how, and what was the genesis of it, and what do you guys do?
Yeah. So AWS gave us three things, I guess, like kind of ways of working,
Right.
technology chops. So, we were all as a group really significantly upskilled through our experience in AWS. This is how you use these top technologies most effectively, but where the new business is built on AWS. And these are the standards for security and operational excellence, which are really important for us because we provide critical infrastructure. Ways of working, technology excellence, and then what Meter does is actually inspired by our experiences in AWS too. And so
Right.
the story, but it's not just AWS. It was actually GameSparks before. So just to explain that quickly, when we were at GameSparks, we had a usage-based pricing strategy. So we charged our customers, who were games companies, on the basis of the number of live players they had, plus a bunch of bells and whistles. So it was usage based, and it was appealing. It was one of the reasons why the company was successful. It was quite unusual; like there weren't that many companies that priced in that way, but it really worked for us. But we did have a lot of pain associated with it. So there was a lot of operational pain around billing, and there
Mm-hmm.
was a lot of go-to-market pain about people not having the right information at their fingertips internally. So the people who were talking to customers and also our customers, they didn't understand why they were being charged what they were being charged. When we got to AWS, what's interesting about them is that they price in a very similar way. It's
Right.
all usage based. And what we saw is that they had exactly the same problems that we'd experienced at GameSparks. And what we also saw is the tooling that they built to address those pain points. So the initial thinking about Meter really did come from when we were at AWS going, oh, it wasn't just us at GameSparks. AWS had this problem too. And then we went and we talked to a bunch of other software companies and saying, look, sorry, particularly those who had usage-based pricing, and said, look, do you have these problems as well? And we found out that everybody had these problems.
Right.
So Meter was basically about bringing the solutions that AWS had built themselves to the rest of the software industry. And I can talk a little bit more about what that is exactly, our inspiration came from our first-hand experiences at GameSparks and AWS.
Right. So you were one of the groups that got exposed to the like usage based pricing fairly early. What were some of the key challenges, and what's the current solution look like?
So the problem with usage-based pricing um, is that it's new for software. So software has traditionally been sold on the basis of fixed licenses or simple subscriptions. So like since SaaS arrived in the early 2000s, it's mostly been subscriptions. So all the revenue stack tooling that people use is well adapted for subscriptions and not for usage based. Now the problem with that is that those systems are loosely coupled. So your sales system, your production system, and your finance system, CRM, your product, and your ERP, they're all quite loosely coupled in software. which is fine if you're using subscriptions, but it becomes a real problem if you've got usage-based pricing.
Hmm.
And that lack of sort of tight coupling generates real problems in billing. It generates real
Hmm.
revenue leakage issues. It generates customer experience problems because people don't know about their usage and their billing. It's generally a real pricing agility problem. It's very difficult to change pricing, which is a real blocker for product who want to launch new products and packaging, and it's a real blocker for sales who want to design the right deals that win customers. And we focused on what's missing. It's like, okay, so what's fundamentally missing when you start doing usage pricing in software is that you don't have a means of processing usage data, collecting and processing usage data, which is metering, which is why we're called metering, and applying pricing to it, so rating. So there isn't a capability to do complex rating. And as soon as you're doing any kind of usage pricing, your rating gets much more complicated. It's much more difficult to work out what's on the bill. And so what you would see back in the day is that companies would either build some really expensive and difficult internal tooling to address that, or they'd still have quite a basic manual-based system involving a spreadsheet of doom where, and the spreadsheet would have like every month people would pull in usage data. They'd ask somebody in engineering to do an extract from a database somewhere, and then they'd apply the pricing to it on the spreadsheet to work out what goes on the bill, which is a really bad way of doing it. Like it's
Wow.
brittle, it's error prone, it's inflexible, and it's not continuous. You're only doing it once a month. And so Meter comes along. We provide basically billing infrastructure which does all that automatically. We're sucking in the pricing information, the usage data information, the account information, processing it, which is basically to work out bill calculations and then delivering those bill calculations wherever they're needed all around the business. So yes, the billing system, but also in the sales and customer success systems, and also to the BI stack, and also to the product itself, because customers themselves want to know how much they're using and what the running total of their bill is at any one time. So that's what Meter does. We're billing infrastructure which enables existing revenue stack tooling to work well in usage-based pricing scenarios.
That's a good pitch. Wordy, but good. Good.
Ah,
Makes sense. And so, how did you? It's a critical infrastructure, like you said, right? And you now service primarily large enterprise customers. How did you land your first design partners? And did you traditionally, like everyone else, moved up the chain, or given your experience, you had the luxury of starting big?
I wouldn't necessarily describe it as a luxury, but we did start big. That
Okay.
so we did that deliberately. You kind of have a choice of two entry strategies, which you referred to. So one is you can supply simple early stage businesses,
Yeah.
and so it's relatively easy to build product for them because then the requirements are simpler. And then hopefully you generate momentum with that initial group, and then you build out your product so that it becomes more sophisticated, and you hang on to those customers as they go through their journey. So, but we didn't want to do that. We wanted to start with large software companies, and because we really understood how complex things got, and so we wanted to solve for that complexity. But the challenge then is that you're a little unproven startup who want to provide critical infrastructure to big established companies with $100 million plus revenues, and that's a bit tricky. The way we did it is it was incredibly helpful that we were repeat founders who came out of AWS. So we had a bit of reputation, which helps open doors. And the other thing we did is a lot of discovery. Like we would use our network and we would go and talk to senior people at businesses that were good examples of who we'd like to supply to. And we'd say, listen, we see this problem. We're really interested to know whether it exists because we're thinking about launching a company and building a product to address it. And we did 60 or 70 of those discovery calls. We invested a lot of time. And this is before we'd even laid down a line of code. And our initial customers came from that group. And what our proposition to them was basically like, you need something. At the moment, you don't have any alternative but to build it yourself. We're thinking of building a company that creates this product. Why don't we work together? Why don't we co-create the product? So the advantage for you is you have a lot of influence over what we're building in the same way you would if you did it internally. But the other advantage is you're not going to have to pay anything like as much as you would if you were building it internally because we're doing this for several other people at the same time and using VC money. So that's how
Yeah.
we recruited our customers. We did loads of discovery, and then within that group of discovery interviews, the people who were most excited by what we were thinking about doing, we recruited to be our design partners. That's how we got going. And it meant that from the start, we were building for the more complicated customer, which gave us real advantages in terms of the product we built, and which we still benefit from today.
And during the first few pilots with these design partners or building the product with these design partners, were there any surprises? Are there things you wish you knew about usage or infra that you missed from AWS?
I definitely wouldn't suggest that the path was all smooth,
Right.
and because I don't think it ever is.
Yeah.
I think the good news is that, we had a vision, and 5 years later, that vision is still there. So there's been a lot of consistency about what we were building. So we've never gone through a major pivot. We've never gone, oh, we're building the wrong thing. All the course corrections have been relatively small, where we've thought we're not quite thinking about it the right way. Oh, we've learned from how the customers think about things. Oh, the need is slightly different. So lots of minor course corrections, but no major ones. We did run into some sort of architectural and design challenges where we deliberately took a step back. It's like, actually, we understood the problem well enough, but the way we've designed the solution isn't quite right. It's better to stop, take a step back, fix it, and move forward, rather than to continue down this path, because this will keep with us forever. So
Right.
you're building foundations, so you need the foundations to be right. So there were some moments where we deliberately took a step back to make sure that we had the right foundations in place, and I'm glad we did. But broadly, it's been a process of continual learning, but in the same broad direction.
When you took that step back and re-architected, that was more from the technical standpoint and not the vision. Did you
Yeah.
already have customers then?
Yes. So it wasn't the wrong product. It was
Right.
the wrong technical design.
And so,
Rather, it wasn't wrong necessarily. It's just you could look down the track and you would see the one that I'm thinking about in particular is that we could see future scaling problems. So not ones that we're experiencing right now. And so we could have
right,
ignored it, but we're
right,
like, no, no, no. Like, we will start hitting problems in future. So let's fix it now. But that's quite we were using AWS ways of thinking about things. Like this is one of those AWS behaviors about looking round corners and sort of considering several steps down the path. But yeah, so it's a hard decision at the time, but absolutely the right one.
And so, in a decision like this, what are you weighing? What were some of the setbacks because did take a step back? How does someone think about these things from a business point of view?
Well, you're thinking about opportunity costs. So you've only got so much resource. So you've raised X amount of money, and that means that you can support a team of such and such a size. And if we redirected that team towards basically rebuilding part of the foundations, they weren't working on new features that customers say they wanted. But this was a real learning that came from the first business from GameSparks, is that I remember conversations towards the end there where we would go, we are a lot more feature mature than we are operationally mature. So the platform could do a bunch of things, but from a non-functional requirements point of view, like for example, scaling or availability or resilience, we didn't build to a high enough level of quality in retrospect. And so we were pretty determined not to make the same mistakes um, in Meetup. So yeah, so that's the trade-off though. It's like you're not building new features, you're focusing on operational excellence. And so that feels a bit like an indulgence. Like you're an early stage business, you're always in a hurry. You always want to get on with it, you want to delight customers with the next whizzy new feature. But we were deliberately not doing that. But what it does is it allows you you're clearing away problems for your future, because by doing things at a high level of quality and those high standards of operational excellence, it means that you can scale effectively. And so again, I don't think we made the wrong decision at all. I think we made the right ones. It's just it feels painful because you're you're optimizing for the medium term, not the short term.
Right. And so, were you able to hit the numbers that you promised your investors? And how did you manage the optics for existing customers and people who were in the pipeline? What were
So
the
it's
challenges?
it's an interesting question, this, because we're relatively advanced now, but we're talking about a time 2 or 3 years ago where we
Right.
were early in our journey. It's very difficult to forecast businesses in the early
Yeah.
part of their journey, because who knows? You've got no trading history really.
Yeah.
So you try and come up with sort of sensible projections, but I think everybody really realizes that we're just doing our best, and we'll find out what happens, and then as we accumulate more trading history, we'll be able to forecast and budget with more confidence. And early stage investors know that.
Yeah.
So I think what they're looking for is progress on the fundamentals, and so we were able to deliver that.
Right.
The other game that you play with investors is, particularly if you've got really high quality VC investors, as we do, they need to believe in a moonshot outcome.
Right.
If everything goes well, like this business is going to be completely wildly successful. So you sort of this doesn't happen all the time, but often you're sort of playing a game where you're putting numbers in front of them which satisfies their need to believe that it could be really big, even
Right.
though everybody who's looking at these numbers realize that the chances or the likelihood of these numbers happening is quite low.
Right.
So you're describing a possibility rather than making a promise, if you see what I mean. And there's sort of
Yep.
like there's a dance that you have to do with your investors around that. But yeah, like but with all these things, the key thing is communication. Like, you talk to people regularly, you're relatively transparent about things. You don't get overexcited about the successes, you don't get overly concerned about the knockbacks. It's just like, you're learning, you're building a business. And it's only when you get to the kind of stage we're at now where it becomes a bit more predictable.
And so, from our last conversation, I remember you've also carried a chunk of your team through now, a long journey of being at GameSparks, carrying them to AWS, and now here at Meter. I'm sure you love working with each other, which is why things have persisted across three orgs in terms of work relationships. What are some of the things that someone can do, and what are some of the lessons from this longer journey in terms of work relationship?
But actually say it's four because GameSparks, a lot of the people who staffed GameSparks came out of that company that were my supplier building the online TV platform
Right.
at Meta. So it's four.
Four. Yeah. Wow.
Plus, but plus new blood as well, which is really important, which I'll come back to. Like in
Right.
terms of, I mean, yes, like there's some fundamentals, like people like working with each other, and that's important. I think our conversation before about culture and being deliberate about it and talking to each other is like, how do we want to work with each other? What is our operating model? I think that's really important too, because people feel like they've got influence over the working culture. They craft it towards something that they like, and they worry that that won't be easily achievable elsewhere. So they feel ownership
Right.
of the culture, and also, I mean, this is, I don't know how big a thing this is, but we've always really believed that people should have ownership of the company as well. So the way our option schemes work as well, it's like, right, everybody's an owner here. Everybody owns the company, including owning shares in the company via these option schemes. So yeah, by the way, it also helps that you're doing exciting things. Like, I
Yeah.
work with a bunch of smart people, and so it's fun that we've taken on something which is really challenging because that gets people's blood flowing when they get to work every morning. It's like, right, we're not doing something boring. We're not solving a problem that's been solved a million times before. We're doing something really challenging at the bleeding edge for very demanding customers, and that's exciting. So that's also important. Like, you need to give people that continued sense of challenge. So yeah, I guess it's all those things, but at the same time, it's not like it's the same group of people from 15, 20 years ago. It's we've introduced lots of other people who feel just as much original gangsters as the earlier people, and
Right.
that's again, it's a culture thing. You're very deliberate about like telling people before they join what it's like, and you're very deliberate about onboarding them and integrating them into the team. And
Right.
again, I think that's something that we've done pretty well.
Yeah, because old, like new people might feel they're outsiders, especially given the length of the relationship. And so you're saying onboarding was essential for fixing that problem.
It's certainly part of the solution is that
Right.
and we're also a remote first business, so onboarding is also really important from that point of view as well. It's just that much more difficult to onboard somebody if they're not coming into an office. So yes, we're really deliberate about onboarding, but it's also recruitment is key. As you recruit, you're really clear about standards, but also about culture and working practices. So people like self-select in or out. It's like, yeah, I really want to work at that company, or I don't want to work at that company. And then some of the ways that we interact with each other is also key. We have a real emphasis on, I'm going to call it radical candor because that's a term that people recognize. I think that's a bit of an exaggeration, but it's it's really important that people share what they think
Right.
and share their opinions freely. And I would always say that it's not a right that you have to share your opinion. It's actually a responsibility.
Right.
We need to hear what everybody thinks about this. We'll take into account like how expert that view is, but people should share their thoughts and feelings and opinions freely, and that really helps with integration because people feel
Right.
like they're part of it straight away. They're not sort of off on the periphery, sort of listening. From day one, they're involved and having to talk about what they think. So that really helps too. But one final thing, like really helps. Nice people attract nice people, and so we've accumulated. One thing that people always say about Meteor is we've got a really nice group of people here,
Right.
and that really helps. people like working with nice people, so people stay and new people are attracted to join, and that really helps.
Makes sense. Yeah, it's always good to have nice people.
It is always good to them. It's sometimes underestimated.
Underrated. Yeah. And so, like, given you're a remote org, and I think the jury is still out. There are a lot of people who are going back to office. There are a lot of startups I see who are um, uh, deliberately now having small teams but in person. What's your view on that? And more importantly, what are some of the lessons from the remote onboarding that people can learn and execute a good remote onboarding for people who are running a remote shop?
So I don't have any option to go back to the office because
Right.
we've always been remote from the very beginning, which means that we have people all over the place, and I don't know where
Right.
I would put the office. So so I committed to it. That said, like we were committed to it from a long way back. So people are comfortable with working remotely now, or uncomfortable with the idea that a company could be entirely remote. That's because the pandemic happened. And before the pandemic, it was a slightly outlandish idea. And so we were planning it then. And, you could see some real innovators out there. And so we did a lot of studying. Like this is partly based on the fact that my co-founder lives in Dublin and I live in London. And neither of us
Right.
wanted to move to each other's cities. So we're like, well, let's build a company that suits our lifestyles. So we were like, right, okay, can we do remote properly? And so we did a lot of studying and then we went, right, you can do this, but you have to be really deliberate about it. I mean, a couple of other things. I would always say we're remote first rather than remote only. People spend most of their time working where they want to, like, and not physically together. But every 3 months, we get the whole company together
Right.
for a week. It's basically, think about it as a pop-up office. So there's some sort of structured sessions, all hand sessions, but it's mostly everybody's just together working in close proximity with each other. And that's an absolutely critical part of our model. So in-person contact is a key part of our model. It's just only 10% of what we do rather than 100. And then just thinking about how to onboard, the key for me is structure. So like everybody has an onboarding plan, and it's one of the things that we learned from AWS, and everybody who joins Meter always remarks upon. It's like, right, you have an onboarding plan, and it's the first day, first week, first month, first 3 months, and it's very structured, and it makes sure that you forge connections around the company and absorb these working practices. So there's various ways of doing it. And so I think that's the key thing. It's the deliberateness. You have to write it down, and then you have to
Right.
tick it off. And that's how it works. But the meetups, that's what we call our pop-up office weeks. They really help as well because there's just that injection of energy. If you're onboarding somebody, the week after meetup is when they feel really connected to the rest of the company because they've met everybody in person.
Is it like in a co-working space, or
We've
where do you guys?
experimented with the different things. The model that we're doing now is we do it in hotels because we started off by like people would stay in a hotel and then we'd have a co-working space and we basically take it over. People like the fact that if you find the right hotel, you can have a bunch of meeting rooms within the hotel all clustered together. And that's the model that we like to do now. But they're fun because they're brilliant for alignment. So you bring people around you use them as planning periods. So people know they happen quarterly. So people know what they'll be doing for the next quarter, but they're also really good just for generally forging connections. So knowing people and spending time with them in person, it just really helps when you're working with them remotely afterwards. And they're also really great for creativity. So exercises where you want to be on your feet and with a whiteboard, you can do them remotely, but they're just that much more easy if you're in person together. So that's when we tend to do sessions like that, and so that creates a structure for our year because we know that there's going to be that week every quarter where we're together, where we'll do a lot of that type of work. Yeah.
Makes sense.
But anyway, and then so in terms of how you set it up, hotel with a bunch of meeting rooms is the model that we found works best.
Interesting. Yeah. And so, what are some of the current challenges? I know we were talking about GTM earlier, but what are some of the key challenges today for you?
So I mean, like startups are exercises in problem solving, and to an extent, you solve big rock problems in sequence. So we talked before about replatforming. So um, we spent a lot of
Right.
time working on the product, and the good news is that we've got a market leading product, which really helps.
Right.
We spent a lot of time working out how to engage with customers. So that's from the first moment that we start talking to them in the sales process all the way through to activating them, meaning like helping them through implementation and helping them get best value out of the product after they've gone live. So we're really good at that because we put a lot of effort into it. And so the new big rock at the moment is pipeline generation, top of the funnel pipeline generation. So, we're a good business. We got good revenues and we're growing strongly. But now we've fixed all those problems around products and how we engage with customers. It's time to really sort of juice the go-to-market and start growing much more quickly. So that's where a lot of our focus, I wouldn't necessarily describe it as a problem, but that's a lot of where our focus is at the moment. It's like, right, how do we go faster? We go faster by loading more opportunities into the top of the hopper. How do we do that? So that's the sort of like the big company priority right now.
So you were heavy on outbound, and now you want to be out there, promote, talk about the business.
Yeah, it's sort of gone in phases. Like initially, like we talked about how we recruited our first customers. I mean, obviously that was all outbound because we were just
Right.
finding ways of starting conversations with people, which would be a discovery call, and then we'd segue into propositioning them about working with us. Then we went through a phase where we became more inbound. So, we developed reputation as being an innovator. We launched out of stealth. We did a lot of good thought leadership pieces. So that created enough inbound demand for us at the time because we couldn't cope with too many customers because we were still pretty early stages.
Right.
And now we're sort of getting to the phase where we're sort of industrializing the inbound and outbound, where the boundaries between them are beginning to blur quite a lot. And we're also able to build proper partnership channels because we're established. We're a proven product with great customers who talk enthusiastically about us. So we're beginning to be able to light up good partnerships too, and those are with complementary tool vendors. So CRMs and ERPs where Meter makes them work better, but also implementation and advisory consultancy business. Meter is something that they can use to deliver outcomes for their clients. So yeah, so there's the partnership side, and then on the inbound and outbound side, it's just it's not it's a continuum. It's just an industrialization. It's like we're getting better and better about um, being able to see and respond fast to intent signals,
Right.
and we're getting better and better about what I call intercepting demand. So if there are people out there looking to solve the problems that we solve for, we're just getting better and better about appearing in front of them at just the right moment. Which is about basic things like organic SEO and PR
Yeah.
and that kind of thing.
Yeah, makes sense. I guess it's a good problem to have, right? You want to have a mature product and then worry about these things than the other way around.
Yes, I think about this a lot. Ultimately, yes, it's much better to have a good product and challenges with go-to-market than the other way around, as you said, because I think go-to-market is fixable if you've got a good product. But if you've got loads of customers and you disappoint them because your product isn't good enough, then I think that creates real problems that are difficult to come back from. So yes, I'm ideally you do everything all at once, but if you're going to do it in sequence, it's better to do it the way we.
Makes sense. All right, we have reached the random questions.
Oh yeah, go on then.
Right. What's the weirdest internal phrase or metaphor your team uses or you use?
We use a lot of AWS isms. So,
Mm,
we say things like disagree and commit and one-way doors. But the one that's sort of more unique to us is, and this particularly comes from me, is that we'll qualify what we say with how much conviction we have about it. So I'll say, Vishesh, I think this is a brilliant podcast, but I've got low conviction. Do you remember we talked about people should have a responsibility to share what they think?
yeah,
It's part of that because if you're saying, okay, well, this is what I think, but you don't have high conviction about it, you should say so because then people can ignore you.
yeah.
Whereas if you've got high conviction, they should listen to you. So we do that all the time. It's like, yeah, this is the low conviction view, but this is it. Well, this is the high conviction view, and so everybody's always sort of adjusting how much they're listening to somebody based on what they're saying about their conviction.
That makes sense. I agree on the podcast, but we'll get there. That's a good way to, I guess, on the flip side, not just help people if they want to tune out, but also to pull people in and kind of, hey, you need to listen to this.
Definitely. I actually, if I'm getting more geeky about it, I actually have a 2 by 2 matrix in my head because on one axis is your level of conviction, and the other
Right.
axis is your level of expertise. So if somebody goes, I think this, I'm highly expert in this area, and I've got high conviction about it, you really need to listen to that person. If someone says, I think this, but I'm not at all expert and I don't have much conviction, you should ignore that person.
Right.
And the trickier ones are the other quadrants. So what do you do when somebody has high conviction but low expertise? You have to listen to them because they need to feel listened to because they've got a high degree of conviction. And the fact that they've got that gut feel matters. But you probably shouldn't be too influenced by it.
Right.
And then what do you do with people who've got like high expertise but low conviction? That tells you something. It's like it's not that obvious.
Yeah.
So yeah. But anyway, I'm getting overcomplicated. But yeah, Well, we'll sort of have
Oh,
these
that's a
slightly abstract conversations where we talk about our level of expertise and conviction about our opinions. Not every opinion is the same.
yeah, 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 makes sense. Yeah, it helps you, yeah, helps you pay attention. Right. Next one. If Meter were a machine, what would it do that no one else can?
Meter is, just to use the AWS theme, we're like a AWS logistics facility.
Hmm.
Loads of stuff come in, get sorted
Right.
out, and loads of stuff come out, and it happens at enormous volume and enormous velocity. That's what Meter does. If you look at the fundamental of what we do, we're infrastructure that sits behind the scene, and we pull in, billions of usage data, um, events, and we pull in the pricing, we process it all out, and then we deliver back out to the world in a bunch of different places, billing and usage data. That's Meter's role.
Interesting.
So we help people get their Christmas presents on time.
That's a good one. What's your favorite book that you'd recommend to other people in general or founders? If there's anything specific from your founder journey that you really enjoyed and helped you.
So you and I were talking about books before we started.
Oh
So,
yeah, that's true. That's so funny.
so, um, what we were talking about is that you like nonfiction, and I like to alternate between fiction and nonfiction.
Yeah.
My instinctive reaction is to tell you a fiction book, which is completely unhelpful for founders, but is my favorite book. My favorite book is The Count of Monte Cristo by Dumas. It's an absolutely awesome book. I would recommend anybody read it. It's big and fat. It's like 1,000 pages or more, but it's worth it. In terms of books that help founders, man, like I read a lot. I'm going to suggest Never Split the Difference by a guy called Chris Voss, which is all about negotiation strategy. He's an
Yeah.
ex-FBI negotiator. I thought that was an excellent book.
Yeah. Never split the difference. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. I've read it. Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah. All right. How do you structure follow up without feeling like a pest?
So a structured follow-up without feeling like a pest.
Yeah.
You get the person to take ownership of the task, and
Hmm.
this is an AWS thing, and it's like a mantra through my head: action, owner, date. Action, owner, date. Like at the end of every meeting, what's the action? Who's owning it? What's the date it'll be delivered by?
Hmm.
And so everybody knows up front what the follow-up is and who owns it. So if you come and say, where is it? Like it's not a surprise. You're not being a pest. That person is committed to doing it because we defined the action, we assigned ownership, and we gave a date. So that's how I do it. It's you're not being a pest. You're just checking that people have taken full ownership.
Yeah, that's cool. Like for the internal stuff, that makes so much sense. What about sales? You're a founder. You must be reaching out to people for selling. And what about follow-ups on on the sales front?
Oh, I see what you mean. Well, I mean, you've got to do it with a
No, I
certain.
think the question applies on both cases. I'm just interested in the others on the other side as well.
I mean, it does. It does. A lot of the same stuff applies. Like really good sellers, particularly in enterprise scenarios, are good at imposing structure and a framework on things. So they're like, "Hey, we're not just here to have a nice conversation. We're here because you've got a problem that you need to solve, and I'm here to help you solve it. So the next step is we should do this. Either you should own it or I should own it, and we should get together by this date to talk about it." And you get they are the buyer, but they are investing in the process because it's for it's for their benefit.
On good. Yeah.
So it's kind of the same. I mean, the other
Yeah.
thing I would say is like always do things with charm and humor. Like, people like buying from people, and like the more they like them, the more likely they are to buy from them. So never lose that. Like, don't be a pain when you're dealing
Yeah.
with potential customers.
It helps when you're British.
Does it? Okay, I'm not sure it does. I
I mean,
think
British charm is famous, isn't it?
really. Okay, I'll take that.
At least in certain parts of the world.
Okay, well that's nice to hear, but I often think that it would be much better to have an American accent.
Hmm. Right. All right. I think that was it. I think before we end, where can people reach you and follow you? And yeah, how do people find out more about Meter?
Two ways. Go to our website. It's meter.com. So that's m3ter.com. Or find me on LinkedIn. So I'm Griffin Parry on LinkedIn rather than Griff Parry.
Well, Griffin, it was a pleasure talking to you
Cool.
and loved the conversation. And thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever your favorite podcast app is. See you in the next episode.